Okay, welcome everyone.
Hi, good to be here.
Hi, it's great. It's great to be all here discussing one of the key. I must say the key problems, but the key aspect of crypto and DeFi, which is interoperability and cross-chain transaction, and how we can all achieve a better user experience, because this is all does matter at the end. So I'm joined by some amazing people, a great expert. Each of them is working on very, very interesting projects. So what I would like to do is, if each of you can introduce yourself, then that will help basically viewer to understand each project, and then we can go a little bit more into more question about how we can achieve a better user experience, facilitating transaction across different chains. Philip, do you want to start?
Sure, I will start. So, hey, I'm Philip. I'm the founder and CEO of Live Finance. Live Finance aims to build the middle layer in between DeFi infrastructure and the application layer. So we are aggregating cross-chain bridges of all kinds, connect them through all the DEXs on each chain, and facilitate cross-chain any-to-any swaps. And yeah, we provide that out of the box for developers so that they don't have to care about bridging and that they don't have to educate the consumers about that.
Okay, awesome. Barney?
So my name's Barney, and I am the co-founder of the Umbria project. And we're working on a few things, but the thing we're most excited about right now is our multi-purpose cross-chain bridge, which is going to facilitate moving any ERC20 type asset or EVM compatible asset from any EVM compatible blockchain quickly and cheaply.
Right, and you work with Oscar, so you both co-founded Umbria. Oscar, do you maybe want to explain how the project started and what you are mostly excited about, a part of the bridge? I'm saying broadly about the DeFi space.
Sure, yeah, well, Barney gave a pretty good introduction to Umbria, but we're both developers on Umbria, and Umbria is kind of sort of tackling some of the major problems in the DeFi space at the moment. Things like user experience in general, because the user experience around DeFi is already kind of a difficult thing for a lot of people, especially the layman. So there's certainly like a steep learning curve there. So that's one of the challenges that we're also working on at Umbria, and that's one of the challenges that I'm very focused on and very excited about providing good solutions for.
Fantastic. And Umbria is powered by Polygon. So as if I think now is your turn to come in and give us a quick overview of Polygon, which is one of the quite well-known project right now, I would say.
Yeah, thanks Stefania for that. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Just a small quick intro about me. So I lead Polygon DeFi efforts. So basically that would be all things DeFi, whether it's making sure that developers have the best tooling or the best exposure, and making sure that the idea of DeFi composability, that is a reality here. And for people who might not be aware of Polygon, so Polygon is a scaling solution aggregator for Ethereum. We intend to roll out an array of scaling solutions, and currently our POS chain is live, which is doing a lot of transactions, around 6 million per day and around 120K daily active users. And in the coming months, we intend to release rollups as well.
Okay, interesting. Now, Lee, it's your turn, and I know that at Harmony, cross-chain transaction is basically the core of the project. So if you can just explain about Harmony for people that are not familiar with the chain.
Yeah, thank you, and good to be with everyone. So at Harmony, we're a layer 1 blockchain that launched 2 years ago on mainnet with proof of stake and sharding. And so we're EVM compatible, and the where we come in is we have actually built a bridge to Ethereum and Binance Smart Chain, and bringing assets from both the chains onto Harmony, where they can take advantage of the 2-second transaction times and very low fees. So we for example, we deployed with Sushi on Harmony with incentives that has now like 50 million in TVL. And one of the interesting things is that we're very focused on building bridges with light clients to Ethereum, to BSC, and we'll be building bridges to Bitcoin and Cosmos and the Polkadot ecosystem. So we think that like in the future, there will be, it'll be a much easier experience where people can just build their application once and get liquidity from all the major chains, because we have these bridges that can be abstracted away for developers, and even users won't have to worry about which chain they're using. It will just be like a simple application where they can get the best products, best yields in DeFi in general. So yeah, I think the multi-chain world is here, and it's here to stay, and we'll keep building it to make it an easier experience for developers and users.
Great. I'm really looking forward to see the conversation that you're going to have with the guys at Umbria. I think that will be interesting. But maybe let's start from the basic, right? I'm a trader myself, and one of kind of the issue that everybody out there is facing is this movement of digital assets. So if I'm trading on Ethereum, I have got a specific setup for Ethereum. If I'm trading on Matic, I'm kind of like in a different setup. And so it's look like people have to kind of choose between which setup they are using. You know, if you are on Polygon, you are with Polygon. So I think this is kind of like limiting, obviously, as the blockchain ecosystem is developing. So if we maybe can start digging a little bit into these challenges that users are facing, because, you know, obviously in your project, each of you is trying to solve some of them, and most of you are also traders like myself. So shall we maybe start to list what are the challenges at the moment for crypto, for trading and investing in crypto and moving assets between chain?
Shall I just start then? All right, I think we're just in the process that liquidity starts to fragmenting across different layer 2s that are just coming up. And at the same time, more and more layer 1s are getting EVM compatible, that fragments funds even more. And as we are just starting to see these movements, now is the time to actually build the bridges. Before that was not possible and not necessary. And I think the major challenge right now is to get these things done in parallel, while avoiding that we have too many bridging solutions, because the more bridges we're going to build, the more maintenance we put towards future debt developers, because right now debt developers have to decide on which chain to deploy their debt and how to educate the users, how they can move their funds from A to B. We have seen this especially since BSC became so big, and then Polygon went up and skyrocketed, and now all the funds are being stuck between BSC and Polygon. Yeah, that was just the very first example about what's going to happen. And as soon as Arbitrum, Optimism are going live, and EVM compatible layer 1s like Harmony are getting more traction, like with the launch of Sushi, that problem will just increase. So we are kind of stuck in between more and more fragmenting and more and more still very immature bridging projects.
I think cost as well is a big factor, and it's a big factor right now for even trading in quite large quantities. But I think even with some of these layer 2 solutions and more cost-efficient blockchains coming out, it can still be too cost inefficient for a lot of applications. So in the height of the Ethereum gas prices a few months ago, it was costing upwards of $50 to transact on something like Uniswap, which makes a lot of things impossible to do with DeFi. But even with the introduction of things like Binance Smart Chain and KuCoin Community Chain, using DEXs that have a similar architecture to Uniswap on those chains, we're still seeing very expensive transactions. They can still be in the order of dollars. And I think that limits a lot of the things that are possible with all of this decentralized finance. Things like use cases like microtransactions, or things that need to be resolved very quickly. There's still a lot of work, I think, to be done in speeding things up and making things much cheaper when it comes to actually using these DeFi applications.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Also, also one big issue that I personally feel for these protocols is that most of these protocols may be community run or may have just started ground up without VCs or external support. So let's say if we talk about Sushi, which is perhaps one of the biggest community projects. Now Sushi has this ambitious roadmap of deploying on every chain, which, as Philip talked, creates this liquidity fragmentation problem, but it also creates this sort of community fragmentation problem as well, because now in a way the whole community has to keep up with all these deployments and then push these deployments on those respective chains, which maybe perhaps asking a bit too much from the communities, given that they are so grounded in nature currently, and there isn't like a whole sort of company or 100 people employed in a glass building that can manage this thing. So this will also be perhaps a challenge in the multi-chain universe.
So you're basically saying that, I mean, what is going to be the one win whole, or is going to be that we are going to see different kind of ecosystem specialize maybe in something, or in something that the user will need more, they will have different kind of chain without being so fragmented?
Yeah, so upon that, I guess probably one great approach would be the bridging infrastructure. So if the bridging infrastructure is just seamless and is really user friendly, then essentially that solves the liquidity pools problem as well, maybe, as some pools can be hosted on another chain, and using that pool a transaction may occur on a different blockchain. Things like this can be explored surely, because
Okay.
these bridging solutions. Yeah, go ahead, Philip.
Philip, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was going to say,
for me, sorry.
Yeah, we should say a bit, explain what a bridge is, maybe for people they are not familiar, before we go a little bit into more details with the bridging solution.
All right, I will first explain that, and then my take on the future in that sense. So a simple bridge is mainly, literally a bridge that allows to lock funds on one side of a chain and unlock them on another side, on another chain. So you can move you can move value from one chain to the other, and then there are native bridges that do that just for a specific pair in general. And then there are cross-chain liquidity networks like Connext, Hop, and Biconomy that try to avoid going through layer one, but instead try to move in different ways to get from one layer two to the other layer two solution. In my opinion, in the future, developers will just take two things into account. They will first pick a chain based on the language they are used to develop in. Like if they are used to build fast applications in Rust, they're going to go to Solana. And if they come from JavaScript, Solidity might be the easier pick. But even chains like Tezos allow to develop in Python, Pascal, and different other languages and dialects. So the choice will one thing they will take a look at is that the language supported, and the other thing will just be technical properties. So one chain might be more privacy preserving, the other solution might be faster and optimized for speed. Some are very value-driven developers, and for them the most important property is decentralization and on all these things. And that's, for me, that's what these layer ones are competing on. Different technical properties and the languages they support to develop in.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think like the next frontier is really aggregation, whether it's like middleware aggregators or like Sushi can be an aggregator because they're on every chain. They can really just like pull the best prices from anywhere that they're deployed on, and as long as there's a bridge API, they can bridge the tokens themselves in the back, so that the users really like, I imagine in the future, like the user can just go somewhere like sushi.com and app.sushi.com and then just like swap whatever they want on any chain anywhere. And they don't even need to know which chain is in the back, what API is calling which bridge. Like it just sort of works. And so, yeah, right now the fragmentation problem is really real, and they're assets with like bizarre names, like, you know, BSC, USDC, like these 7-letter names that just like is really, to the average person, all they want is $1 and swap to another dollar, or 1 ETH and swap to a dollar. Like it should really be that simple of an interface where they just do it, and everything else is just happening either with the application or with the applications calling the bridge APIs to just do the work.
Yeah, and like you said, with the massively long tickers that all of these coins are getting now, just so they can be named, I feel like that's a real sign of the time that we're still in such early days, and all this technology is still kind of like clunky 1980s internet sort of stuff. And so there's a lot of room for optimization and removing inefficiencies like that. And I think that the bridging technology that's coming out now is that next innovation. You know, we had double spend problem solved with Bitcoin. And then we had smart contracts with Ethereum. Then we had DeFi and NFTs coming out. And now we have that, you know, next level of interoperability between blockchains, and that's going to be the next major innovation.
Pani, maybe you and Oscar, if you can explain a little bit about the bridge that you're working on, so then we can maybe see how different is from the Matic one and how different is from the one that Harmony is developing. I think that will be important because it's going to trigger also to the conversation about centralization versus decentralization for what's best for a user.
Sure. Well, there are a few.
Oscar, did you want to take over?
Yeah. All right. I'll try my best to explain. So there's a few different kinds of bridges that you might create. Some of them are more decentralized than others, and some are more secure in the puristic sense than others. So one way that you can create a bridge is you can use validators, and you can mint tokens and burn tokens depending on what chain you're interacting with at the particular time. And you can do it completely in a decentralized way. But with that way, it could be more expensive. It might be a little bit slower than another method, which would be to just hold assets on both networks and act as sort of a custodian, or almost like an exchange. When someone comes along and gives you one asset on one chain with one hand, you would give them the same asset on another chain with the other hand. And so one of the major challenges, or one of the major concerns going forward with any application that's going to be using a bridge or wants to create their own bridge, is whether they want to trade off the decentralization of validators and all the sorts of things that might slow things down and make things more expensive, compromise on that maybe, and turn it a little bit more centralized. And there's the trade-off between the different styles of the bridges there. So right now in the space, we're trying to flesh out what is the best way to make a bridge, and sort of what applications each style of bridge might have and where they might fit within the space. With regards to the Umbria bridge, we're doing it in a more centralized way, a less sort of purist, decentralized way with validators. And so we're going to be holding assets in a liquidity style fashion on lots of different chains. And then if someone wants to go from, like, let's say Ethereum, they have a token on Ethereum, but they want to have that same token on the Binance Smart Chain, they would give their token to the bridge with one hand on the one chain and receive it again in the other hand on the other chain. So there's no need to have any of the complicated or expensive or slow validation, but you do lose some of that decentralization sort of aspect of bridging. But I guess that comes to the next question, which would be like, how decentralized do you need a bridge to be for particular applications? If you want to just move some tokens from one chain to another, do you really need the full scope of decentralization? And at Umbria, we don't think you actually need full decentralization for every application. And so we're creating a bridge with a focus on incredible low transactions, but also incredible speed, and sort of trimming all of the fat that's not really necessary for a transaction, maybe like an arbitrage opportunity between different networks. So that's the style of bridge we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, and then that liquidity that will be needed to facilitate the bridge will be generated by users that are looking to earn incentives for providing liquidity to our bridge. So similar to a DEX like Sushi or Uniswap, users provide a single asset, any ERC20 token, whatever it might be, and then when people use the bridge and go from one chain to another, that takes a small fee, and then that goes to the liquidity providers of the bridge.
Yeah.
Do you have any question? I see your face, and
well, our bridge is quite different in that we are infrastructure layer. Like we really want to build trustless bridges where the only thing you have to trust is the two blockchains themselves. So Ethereum and Harmony blockchain, there's a light client that sits on the Ethereum side and a light client that sits on the Harmony side, and the token, the asset is locked by the chain basically, and there's no like custodian, there's nobody moving the tokens around, because we actually did a lot of research with some of the top researchers in this field, and there are obviously trade-offs in terms of like cost and speed, and you still have to like basically do a number of transactions on each of the network to lock and mint and then burn and unlock again. But I think this is the kind of the design choice that we kind of chose so that it scales in the future with blockchain, without having us, to do more of the custodial, the token custody and any of the transfer work. So I think that's kind of the main difference, or the main approach that we're taking.
And I think they're definitely both valid choices as well. Like something that requires a high level of security, like doing, $1 million or $1 billion transaction between chains, you definitely want to have, that fully decentralized security to back you up. But let's say you're doing something conversely, like just trying to move $5 over to pay somebody, or you're trying to do a quick arbitrage between blockchains that needs to be really fast and is only a few $100s. And both bridges I think are going to be very useful in the future, and they're going to have like different use cases and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and one of the major considerations is like, what extent does each style of bridge scale? So you might have one style of bridge that works and functions very well when the layer 1 chain isn't congested, or when the custodian machines aren't congested. But then the other style might be better as it scales up. So the major consideration is it usable now, but it's also going to be usable in the future when there's more demand for throughput, or whatever parameter might change as time goes by.
Maybe I can add to that. As we see, there are different approaches and different trade-offs to be made. And it's really up to the user in the end what is important to him, and it depends on the amount to be transferred across which chains. And what we try to do at Live Finance, for example, is we try to dive really deep into the concepts of each different bridging solution, and then we try to grade them based on how many trust assumptions they are going to make, and how decentralized the solution is. And then we try to grade that, and basically we want to have a default prioritization pattern that always values security over speed over costs, and that can be changed by developers and then again by the end user as well. And we try to share that knowledge openly with everyone. Like, we're going to build a huge knowledge hub where we explain in depth all these different bridging solutions, including interviews with the founders, so that developers can make the informed decision. If they don't want to integrate us, they can make an informed decision which solution to take on and to integrate with.
Asif, I feel that you should come in and explain a little bit the bridge that Matic has created, and what are your plans to improve the status of the current bridge.
Yeah, sure. So if you talk about Polygon's bridge, it would be something that has its trust assumptions in form of trusting the POS validators which run our blockchain. So those would be around 100 validators that produce our blocks, and I would say that they are sufficiently decentralized. And when a user bridges their funds from Ethereum to Polygon, the way it happens is that on the bridging side, there's a bridge contract. The funds get locked on the bridge contract, and they are minted one-to-one on the Polygon side. And then users can do whatever they want with their assets on the Polygon side. Same way, when they bridge their funds back, their funds are burnt, their tokens are burnt on the Polygon side, and they are released one-to-one on the Ethereum side. So if you talk about trust assumptions, I would say that it is one of the most decentralized bridges, if you may say, because if you are trusting Polygon blockchain, you are trusting the bridge, and I guess we can do that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, that the Polygon bridge is incredibly secure and trustworthy. And I guess the trade-off with that is having those validators and all of the on-chain processes that need to happen for the bridging to occur, which can be quite expensive. And in the last few months or so, when the Ethereum price went really high and the gas prices got really high, it did get so expensive that small transactions are no longer possible, like transactions in the order of maybe $100 or something like that. And at Umbria, we were so impressed by the Polygon bridge, and we think that it is such a useful thing that we're actually implementing the bridge into our own bridge for when huge chunks need to be moved from Ethereum to Polygon, Polygon to Ethereum. Because with the Umbria bridge, if we're just receiving assets with one hand on one network and giving them back with the other hand on the other network, the liquidity pools become unbalanced, and then eventually funds have to be bridged over the traditional validator Polygon way, if you will. And so that just goes back to the idea that the different styles of bridges have different applications. And sometimes you need the full trustlessness and you're willing to compromise on the speed and maybe the cost of the transaction. But maybe we can have these secondary or tertiary bridges which don't necessarily go through all of the complicated validation because they don't need to, because they are serving a different purpose. And that's kind of what the Umbria bridge is doing.
How easy
there might be some.
I would just say, how easy is to integrate all these bridges? To be able to use all these different kind of bridge?
Yeah, all this stuff is very new.
It just has its own use case and its own way that it has to be plugged in. And it's a good point to ask, like, how effective it is to use the different bridges. Because, for example, if you want to move your cryptocurrency from one chain to another, it's not necessarily a bridge between those two networks. You might have to go to Ethereum first, which is, I guess, the mothership of the whole crypto space. Go from one chain to Ethereum to another chain again, and that becomes even more expensive. That's like double the cost, double bridging, right? So having a different style of bridge, like a more centralized version of a bridge that uses a different method and doesn't require all of the cryptographic assurances of validators. That's another sort of gap that gets filled in the ecosystem.
Lee, thinking about the work that you are doing with Sushi, I just wanted to kind of pause here and look a little bit into Sushi as a project, and what did you saw as, why Sushi? Why do you think is the best place to develop DeFi? So maybe we can explore some other points to discuss.
Yeah, sure. So of course, Sushi is just one of the applications. It's obviously a really big player in the space now, and they have a diversified, like most people think of Sushi as just like a swap automated market maker, but now they have a diversified, like very diverse portfolio of products that include lending, include like EO aggregation with vaults and things like that, and like new token launchpad with Miso. And I think it's really great that we're working with a platform that can keep like expanding and growing. And I see basically like really love the Sushi team. I see them like building and shipping new products all the time. They're gonna ship a new version of their AMM called Trident. And it's really cool that they're thinking about multi-chain and they're going after that strategy. Whereas like, I think some of the old OG Ethereum applications are staying like on layer 2, but Sushi is kind of going everywhere. And I think that's in the long run, probably pretty smart because there's liquidity everywhere. There's new users everywhere. They can like really expand and grow in a rapid way and become, again, this layer on top of all the chains. And like Sushi will integrate all the bridges and they'll pull all the liquidity with the best prices. They can, like I was going to say to the last question, like the applications can decide which bridges to use, right? Based on what the needs are. And like, if it's a very small transaction and they just need it done quickly and the user is willing to pay only a small amount of, transaction fee or slippage, like that can be done in a different way than if it's like $1 million swap between things that would be done using a trustless bridge. So I think Sushi is going to, continue to grow and be like really a mainstay of the entire crypto ecosystem.
Kind of adding to this, I feel in the short term or short midterm, applications going to decide which bridge to implement. But I think in the future that can't be a thing. I think in the future, developers shouldn't care about which bridge is being used. I mean, if we take a look into Web 2.0, if we implement Stripe or PayPal these days, we don't really care about which payment solution providers are being used in the background, right? And they shouldn't care. It's all about building products that create value for the users, and they shouldn't care about how funds are being moved in the background. So our bet is really on abstracting all of that away and make it as simple as possible for developers to get the users' funds move across chain directly into the destination contract, and that's what we have to aim for. We can't expose all that dependency, all these dependencies, and all that maintenance hell towards developers, because these bridges are also changing. So each bridge you implement is another dependency to take care of in the long run, and then at some point you get into a situation where a bridge is not maintained anymore. So you have to implement an alternative, and it comes with so many strings attached. We really have to be careful. I'm encouraging anyone that's building a bridge, like talk to the other guys, like do it together and grow together. Build systems and not single silo solutions.
Seeing that as well with the standardization of layer 2 blockchains, layer 1 blockchains who use smart contracts tending to go for EVM style contracts. And that I think makes it a lot easier for them to scale and become a popular product, just because it's so much easier for us developers to go, right, well, we can implement all of our stuff very easily on that chain now because we've got it all on Ethereum already, and it's just a matter of copy pasting it into Truffle and changing the config to put it onto that blockchain instead. And I think the same is going to be said for bridges as well, especially for things like DeFi and farming. So things like Harvest Finance that go around all of Ethereum and find the best deals for your farming, and then they aggregate everyone's money together, go into that system, earn the best revenue possible, and then give it back to their users. That's all well and good, and that works really well on Ethereum, and they can get a whole bunch of APY for their users. But now that bridging is going to be becoming a thing, we're going to see a whole bunch of similar platforms, I think, trying to do that cross-chain. And the simpler that is for these projects, the better it's going to be. So the simpler the standardization of these bridges, the better.
Just going up a little bit further with what you're saying there, Barney, with going cross-chain on arbitrage, pretty much, with something like Harvest Finance. Something that is going to be really key for applications like that is, for arbitrage, in the case of arbitrage, is to be able to move funds between chains really fast as possible and as cheaply as possible. So that's one of the major challenges that has to be considered when deploying a bridge. Because if there's another bridge that's a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper, there will be places where it's more effective to be used. And so that's the major consideration as a trade-off with the decentralization and the trustlessness of a bridge.
So if right, I'm a trader, right? I've got some assets. I mean, from my user experience, the things that sucks is that you have got different wallets. So you have got MetaMask, you have got Polkadot, you have got Binance Smart Chain, and I've got assets in each of them. And if I have got a Canaria NFTs on the Kusama chain, I can't see in my wallet, in my Ethereum wallet, for example. So from a user experience, maybe what I would like is to have one interface, which is my wallet, where I can, from that wallet, I can move in and about from one, so I can participate in one liquidity mining or in one, in one farm on Umbria. And at the same time, I can just move all the stuff from one place. Maybe that will be what I would like, because otherwise I have to remember the password to get into the Polkadot, and then I forget, maybe I've got some other token on the MetaMask that I didn't add, so I will never know. I don't remember that I've got them, and it kind of just get complicated from a user perspective. I'm not talking from a developer perspective. But I think that's kind of the bad experience that I see.
I suppose the reason that has happened is because when wallets like MetaMask came about years and years ago, there wasn't really a very strong notion of interoperability. So they didn't design those softwares with the ideas of multi-chain portfolios in mind. But as far as the technical challenge is concerned of showing multiple balances on multiple chains simultaneously, there is no great technical challenge. And that's why we have seen some wallet interfaces coming out and showing you what you have on lots of different networks at the same time, and whether they're going to be integrating bridges into that software so that you can, without really knowing what's going on, be able to move things between chains. I certainly think that's going to be one of the things that we're going to start seeing in all these different wallet applications.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the wallet space is a quite competitive space right now, and we have some wallets with huge adoption like MetaMask, and we have some newcomers like Phantom, and many others in between and around. So this will change for sure. They're all going to aim for a multi-chain future. I'm pretty sure of that. Also for us, it was a thought in the beginning, maybe as we are already aggregating, let's also build a wallet, but we don't think that's the right thing to do. We don't want to compete. We want to build a foundation for them to build upon us, and everyone should focus on one specific thing and really live up to that composability thought we have in that crypto ecosystem.
I like the composability element that you just said. So if we are looking at the chain out there, I would like to understand, maybe discuss what you think will be the speciality of each chain. Who wants to?
Do you think? I mean, guys, please add up to it. But I would say it's what I said in the beginning. It's the language of choice. Solana will be able to piggyback on the Rust community. Another smart one might be able to do all of that in Python and JavaScript. The problem with these languages is that they are not strict enough. So it's probably more a TypeScript instead of JavaScript, and maybe a strongly typed dialect of Python as well. So language is one thing. Another thing will be security and privacy related. For some, it's speed. So these guys gonna go with Rust on Solana, or maybe Harmony. Yeah, but the typical candidates, I would say.
But you said Solana because how fast is Solana compared to other chains? If we can just give some numbers, some comparison.
I don't have the numbers here, but just Rust as a language already is one of the fastest, quite low-level languages you can use. And that also comes with a lot of overhead, right? So you have to optimize the language itself or the code itself on a much lower level, and you really have to be an expert to be able to do that, but you can get so much more speed out of this compared to Solidity, which is probably much slower, but also this will change as we go towards WebAssembly.
Yeah, I think that I agree with most of what you're saying, and as well I think actually a lot of these blockchains in the next 10 years or so might not be there. It might be similar to .com, where everyone was building fancy, spicy applications that died in 2001 as soon as everything started going horribly wrong. But that being said, I think that there are some blockchains that will stick around that offer really strong use cases. Things like Ethereum, of course, having high levels of security in their proof of work, although they are going proof of stake, so we'll see how that goes. That'll be an interesting couple of years for sure. And then things like Polygon that offer very fast transactions and very cheap transactions. But I do think that 90% of the blockchains out there that might not offer anything, particularly innovative, we might actually end up seeing them, fizzle away and die at some point. But we'll definitely have a few different blockchains that do, specific tasks that are optimized for security or optimized for speed, or for price or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I would agree with Barney there. Like when developing, I think one of the main considerations when developing on a certain chain, one of the main considerations that you would think about is what can that chain do? How will that chain scale in the future? In my personal opinion, I don't think that the language is as important as was mentioned just a moment ago. I think when a lot of developers do programming, they think in their own sort of, their brain has its own sort of set out to develop software, which is not very strongly tied to the language. Like as a programmer, you learn many different languages throughout your career. And I think you learn to program as its own primary thing before you select your language. You don't, from personal experience, I don't change my style that much between languages when I'm doing programming. And you know, when you discover that one sort of programming style isn't particularly good, you adapt and you change your style. You know, there's always been a programming language war going on. People saying, like one of the classic ones is people saying that PHP is a bad language. And of course, you can write bad programming in any language, but Facebook is written in PHP. So even though it's not necessarily the most strictly purist language for people who love the nitty-gritty of programming languages, I think the major consideration for any programming, any application is to what extent can I make this application do what I want? And that is more of a consideration with regards to the blockchain, what the blockchain can do, rather than what the blockchain's native language can do. Because programming languages, for the most part, and this might be a little bit controversial to say, programming languages basically all do the same thing. And that's a kind of a blanket statement, and it's a little bit oversimplified. But as far as like, you know, choosing between Rust, choosing between Solidity, I think you could probably approximate the same thing in both languages pretty easily, even if you had to learn one of the languages as a new sort of framework.
Interesting. I see the difference.
I think that's right. And it's interesting because the way that, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Barney, go on.
Oh, the reason for the price of a contract being run on a blockchain tends to be like hard-coded prices of certain opcodes that protocol has defined at the start of that blockchain's life. And so I agree that definitely it's important for a blockchain to use a language that's fast and that's optimized and that kind of thing. But I find that the bottleneck with these projects tends to be the gas price rather than you know, the blockchain not being able to handle, well, of course, the amount of data that blockchain can handle and the price are very strongly connected because they can only run a certain amount of power. But I think that it tends to be that the cost of things get way out of hand before the speed of the EVM catches up to it.
Exactly, yeah. Is it the programming language's fault or is it the blockchain's fault that it's expensive? It's probably both, but it's probably more the figure of the blockchain, right?
We have got some questions. Somebody is saying, I mean, this is just a question that is going to drag us away from what we were discussing, coming back to the bridge. Can someone explain what's the cost of development of bridging solution?
Oh, well, open source, right? It's free. If you buy a community. So if you have a strong community, if you have strong social media channels, there's always going to be people who want to come on board and help you do development. And so, you know, all these projects that have BC, they have a huge advantage because they have a launchpad for development, but really the core feature of any platform is its community. And if you can encourage your community to, you know, come along on the journey of development, you can go a long way doing that. I mean, one of the biggest open source projects in the world, Linux, has a huge developer community. And a lot of those developers don't get paid. They just do it for the pure passion of it. And so if you can rally up that same passion within your crypto community and really give opportunities to developers to help and sort of integrate themselves within the project and provide incentives for that, you can go a long way on just that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We had really good experience working with Gitcoin as well. To just like, they have a really amazing community. We give out some bounties to help work with us to build bridges. But I think actually building bridges is, from our perspective, is a pretty like big project and task. It took a lot of research to create the first like gas efficient trustless bridge design that we have put into production, and it's not a trivial like task to do, I would say. Talking
about gas, so and thinking about we are going to have you know, we have all these bridges. Do we have to use different kind of gas depending on the chain that we are using? How that can be solved? Because as a user, again, you need to have the gas, and sometimes I just don't have any Ethereum and I have to keep buying Ethereum, and then and the same when you are on BNB. So I think this is also kind of like an issue.
If you're bridging to a network that is expensive, it's going to be expensive to bridge there. So let's look at the two different extreme styles of bridging. One of them being bridging in a trustless way with validators. There are going to be some smart contracts interacted with at some point between those two chains. So if you're going from Polygon to Ethereum, you have to interact with some smart contracts on Ethereum for the validation to happen. And if Ethereum is expensive at the time, then the bridging is going to be expensive. If you look at the other style of bridging, the more centralized version that Andrea explained, giving with one hand and receiving with the other, you're still going to have to pay, someone's still going to have to pay the transaction costs of sending the tokens, the assets on both sides. So you'll have to pay to send it to the bridge, and the bridge will have to pay to send it to you. So there is always going to be that native fee on both of the chains that you're interacting with when you're bridging. It's just a question of how expensive is it going to be in terms of interacting with smart contracts that do validation, or just the simple transaction fee of the transaction.
Great. I think Azif wanted to come in and comment for, yeah, he raised a hand. Azif, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay,
so yeah,
sorry.
firstly upon the fees, I would say that probably in future, we may see an abstraction of the fees as well, where the user may have just stable coins, and on the back end, they may be paid in the blockchain's gas, and user may not be even aware that something like this has happened. So yeah, that can also be a reality. But I would just like to take a step back and circle to the earlier conversations about blockchains and how the world of blockchains would look like, where Oscar and Philip hinted that not many of blockchains may survive as well. We have a certain different view of future, because if even today, if you look at DeFi, there has been great adoption since in this 1 year specifically, but the total unique addresses are around something like 3 million, and like we all know that every one of us probably has 5-6 addresses, things like that. So the real users may be really low. They may be like around 300K, 400K, something like that. So in a way, I think we may not be accounting for the number of people that will be using these services in the future, these chains in the future. Because let's say what happens when the real users are not 300K, but 10 million, something like that. And in the grand scheme of things, even 10 million may be a small number. Other thing that we have really got to consider is we probably, I guess me and Oscar and Philip mostly work towards the DeFi side of things, and we may sometimes create this silo that everything is DeFi. But if you look at the gaming side or other consumer facing dApps, I would say that they would be needing far higher number of transactions. And this is exactly where other maybe layer ones or other scaling solutions may come up. So let's say if you talk about a gaming dApp, like Axie is showing the way, which with that level of mass adoption, even rollups can't service that. And for that, you need other chains like Polygon POS chain or Harmony for that matter, which can give really high number of transactions for even those kind of dApps. Other thing that we also think may happen is that many of these applications will spin up their own chains. So there's this one sports betting platform called SportX. They have created their own chain where transactions are taking place using Polygon SDK, because that they felt that on whatever blockchain they build upon, as usage increases, gas fee will increase, and they'll have to always play catch up or scale somehow. So why not scale up from day one and build their own chain for settlements? So in future, we may see a lot more blockchains than currently we are seeing. Would love Lee's thoughts here.
Actually, yeah, I love to just add a little bit, which is we think it's still very early as well. Like I mean, if you look at it, I think all financial assets will come on chain. I think all like NFTs, not just in the form of art, but your intellectual property. Like if you write an article, if you write a book, if you are making a movie, like all those things can be built, can have ownership on chain. Real estate, like we're just starting to scratch the surface. And identity, like all of us will have, various identities on chain. And then the other big one that we haven't really talked about is governance. Like I think DAOs are starting to really form. If you went to ECC, there was a whole DAO track, and many people are thinking about how to self-govern. And like DAOs can like scale from a family unit all the way to a country level, right? So like imagine all those people voting on chain, making decisions, on chain. That's a lot of transactions and a lot of use of blockchain as a technology. So yeah, really, like as Asif said, we might be at 300,000 users today, but what happens when we are at 300 million users? And that's really possible. Even in the next, let's say, a couple of years, we tend to underestimate what can happen in 10 years in technology.
I see this quite controversial. I mean, we have already systems like Substrat that allow to spin up your own blockchain quite easily. But as soon as we start doing this for every larger business, spinning up our own blockchain, like we might as well just spin up our own PostgreSQL instance, because then we are centralized again, right? So the whole point of decentralization is that we store information decentralized with independent nodes, especially business independent nodes. So if we end up there, we might as well just pick our AWS RDS instance and stay there, because that's much faster, much leaner from a business perspective, right? Like spinning up your own blockchain, that's not a lean approach. And yeah, I mean, not the, like from different perspectives, not the best goal to aim for as an ecosystem.
I would agree with that too. And I think that's why Rollup technology is so interesting, because it's kind of like a compromise in a way. You're getting, all the very important bits at the peak of the iceberg, and you're putting that on chain to prove that all the stuff that might not be on chain is valid. And so, yeah, Rollup technology is something that I think is going to be used a lot more in the future, because it kind of breaches the gap between having everything on chain being fully decentralized and fully usable by itself, and then having like a fully centralized system where nothing is secured by blockchain consensus mechanisms.
I even want to add to this, like spinning up blockchains for the sake of having things on blockchain is like the worst thing that could happen to us, because that would absolutely dilute our value system, the value system of permissionless, trustless, immutable data stored decentralized, and all of these things, right, guys? Like I think we should definitely not aim for a future in where everyone can easily spin up their own blockchain. We should aim for large ecosystems. It doesn't have to be just one, it could be multiple ones. And in an enterprise context, there might be a private blockchain across different players in the same values, in the same value chain, for example, if you think about logistics, for example, right? So there are many different cases where a specific exclusive blockchain makes sense, but that shouldn't be the one thing we're aiming for in the long run.
I think that's exactly right. And something that I think is sort of, it comes with the fact that the blockchain technology has risen to popularity in such an explosive fashion that everyone wants a piece of the action. And you start treating blockchain like this sort of magical data structure that solves every problem. And really, the blockchain architecture has its own set of its own problems, especially in the context of proof of work, for example. You need to have sufficient mining power to mitigate a 50% attack, to stop a 50% attack, for example. And not everyone has a massive mining rigs for small applications, or in the context of proof of stake, what if one person has all of the stake? So it's not as if you can just apply blockchain to any sort of problem and just hope that it's a magical solution. It's not always even the solution to use a blockchain for some kind of database, because really a blockchain is just a distributed database. And it's a lot of things, but you could call it a distributed database as well. And sometimes in some applications, you would just want to use MySQL because it solves all of the problems that you're hoping to solve with a blockchain. solution without any of those sort of nasty caveats that the blockchain might have. And so I think as the sort of bubble of interest in blockchain technology dies down, people stop sort of trying to jump in and applying blockchain to things and working from the solution down rather than from the problem up.
Yeah, that's a good point to say.
Would partially agree here, surely, but I guess we'd have to consider a few things here. So when we talk about spinning up our own chains, there can be a wide array of applications for which that might be really useful. So let's say we talk about DeFi, right? So for DeFi, composability is just like the fountainhead of DeFi, I would say. So for DeFi, spinning up a chain won't be probably the best idea because it needs the composability, and probably millions of dollars are gonna flow through that protocol or through that blockchain. So it needs high level of security and decentralization. But let's say if you talk about a gaming dApp, something like that, you can say required somewhat lesser security and lesser decentralization. So as we have seen the recent rise of Axie. Second thing here can be when we compared a blockchain to a SQL database, that wouldn't exactly be correct, as different these standalone chains can have their own consensus mechanisms. So either they can have their own validator set or have a shared security model with Ethereum, things like that, which wouldn't exactly be correct to label them as centralized. So yeah, I think we should consider two things here before strongly labeling them as SQL databases, something like that.
Yeah. So what would you say when, I mean, we talk about multi-chain world, and there are people, they are still, it's not they are still, they actually believe that everything can be built on Bitcoin. So what I would like you to comment on that.
Well, there's a lot of things that can't be built on Bitcoin because
its own language, I guess you could say, its own set of opcodes, which are sort of operations that can occur on the Bitcoin network. But they don't create a fully comprehensive programming language, which would be known as a Turing complete language. A Turing complete language is a language that can express any algorithm if, given enough lines of code. But Bitcoin can't do that. There are core, Turing complete features missing from its language feature set. So it's just not possible to create smart contracts on Bitcoin like it is on Ethereum, for example, because Ethereum has its own Turing complete programming language and architecture.
Okay. Lee, do you want maybe to comment on that? On all, the people they're building DeFi on Bitcoin.
I think it's, well, I would echo what was already said, but I think the world is probably much bigger than just even Bitcoin or any one project. And like we can build bridge. The more effective thing to do, in my opinion, is just to build bridges to Bitcoin. Like you can access DeFi. A lot of Bitcoin have been moved into Ethereum ecosystem already. And there'll be more like ways you can bridge between Bitcoin and, like, for example, we're building a Bitcoin bridge that will bridge between Bitcoin and us, and people who have Bitcoin can migrate over in a secure way to access DeFi. So I don't see that, like, I don't see why people want to just stay only on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think Bitcoin has that brand name, and a lot of people who are interested in the space, have just become interested in the space, have heard about Bitcoin and how it's the most important cryptocurrency or the most valuable cryptocurrency. And so you can entice people by saying, well, we're putting another thing on top of Bitcoin, which is DeFi on Bitcoin. Isn't that exciting? Please invest in my ICO. And so I think when people talk about, building all this weird and wonderful stuff on top of Bitcoin, it's really, you've got to be really careful and wonder whether it's just sort of hype talk and things like that. I mean, I've seen ICOs with that promise perpetual motion devices and things like that, just stuff that's completely impossible. And so you've got to be very careful, I guess, when you're looking around the ecosystem, particularly when you're in, such a huge, I guess you could call it a bubble of interest and popularity.
Yeah. But because I think, there is kind of like this line of Bitcoin maximalists. They basically just pushing their own narrative, and they are calling all the other project, shitcoiners. And I think this is a wrong narrative, and we should have stood up and say that's wrong, because, as Lee said, the world is much bigger, and we shouldn't believe. We shouldn't just follow one line thinking that is going to be the future. I think that's very limiting.
I think we have to be aware of the fact that many of these people are not technical people.
Yeah,
and while Bitcoin was the first mover and it wasn't required to be technical in order to incorporate Bitcoin in your life in any sense, this is just something we have to keep in mind. And then Ethereum comes around, and if you're not even familiar with what a database is, and how it functions, it's even harder to understand what a blockchain is and how it functions, right? As a developer coming from the traditional world, like your first transition you make is, well, what used to be my database is now on the blockchain, and damn it, it's not that flexible to work with this data anymore, right? It's immutable. So things are becoming, for anyone non-technical, it's just tremendously difficult to even understand what Ethereum has built and what other layer ones are following up with. And that's just one thing.
Yeah.
I agree with that as well. And I think that a lot of people look at Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies through the lens of a trader or someone looking to try to, get rich quickly. And when you, find a new project that has a technical innovation, it can be difficult to see that if you don't have the technical expertise, or you don't know, you have a full scope of, what the community needs in terms of blockchain development and innovation. And so when you miss all of those technical aspects that make a project really strong, because you're not maybe that technically minded, you're not going to see the value in all of these new projects that don't have the market cap of Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, right, the last question before we wrap it up, that comes from one of the viewers on YouTube, and he said, how can the crypto space and obviously all the development in the space remain out of the hands of the corporate world? Bearing in mind that governments themselves are now becoming more involved, especially by potential legislation. So we see lots of institutions coming on the space. How we can still remain independent and more focus on users and people rather than just be dragged again into a big centralized situation?
Well, I guess the answer to the question depends on where you lie politically and whether you actually think it is a good idea or not a good idea to enable big corporations to have autonomy over certain areas of crypto. I mean, big corporations get a lot of flack and they get a bad rap, but companies not like Apple have given us iPhones. So to a certain extent, maybe you do want big corporations to have their foot in the space so that they can innovate on a large scale. Because when you have innovation, or when you have any kind of produce that is produced, you can benefit from the economies of scale that large corporations bring to the table. So is the question, like, do we want to remove the power from everything that is a bigger corporation than me? I'm not sure that's the right question. I think a better question would be something like, how can we encourage big corporations to use their funds effectively to create great stuff, and how can we do that?
And adding to this, I think like regulation is nothing bad. Quite the opposite. Like, regulation removes all the uncertainty we have in that space. We just need to make sure that we align interest, and ultimately we can't save the blockchain world from macroeconomic effects, from us being human, from capitalism, and all of these things that just make the world as it is. We can only hope that we're going to end up with a system that's slightly better what we have right now. That's realistic. Like, let's take all the idealistic thoughts we have. Let's take all that value system. I mean, the beginning of the internet was supposed to be decentralized and free and censorship free. But then just quite organically, we have built huge data silos like Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, but it happened organically, and it happened because of capitalism, because of network effects, and all these things that are just there, and they won't disappear, and they will also come into play when we think about the blockchain future. We already have these we already see these things, right? Uniswap and Sushi. And all these and Aave and Compound, all these huge players, it will be so hard for competitors to come up and compete against them. So we are by no way free from these effects, and regulation will come in as well, and it will play an important role also to protect consumers to a certain sense. We just have to do our own lobbying, so to say, and make sure that interests are aligned, and maybe we're gonna end up with something that's just a little better as what we're used to.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, like we can keep the network as decentralized as possible, right? That's something that we really can put effort into, and we actually welcome companies to build, like corporations to build on top of this very decentralized network, right? I think we're not going to say like, hey, you can't come in and build applications. Like it's probably a good thing for a lot of participation, but then the thing that we want to keep decentralized and free is the network itself, so that it's not biased towards a certain group, company, country, but it can sustain forever, and it can be still an open platform for everyone to participate equally in. Whether it's a company or a small project from some new developer.
I guess something that's very tempting as well is to sort of say, well, if we create this completely entirely new political system with cryptocurrency, that will be a better sort of system, financial system that we have right now. And it's sort of like, unintended consequences are going to happen. And so what you want to have, and this is something that's coming out with all this decentralized governance stuff, is a framework which will allow all this natural law to happen, like hierarchies to sort of organically occur, and different pockets of authority and power that just naturally occur, and just have a framework for that to naturally occur while minimizing corruption and minimizing all of the sort of malicious outside forces that might happen if that framework wasn't structured in a specific way. But going as far as to say, I think I have the best system in my mind, and I'm going to try to play God and create something that will be the best. I think we've done that throughout history with politics and with economics, and it always, every time we flatten something, the hierarchies build themselves again through that natural process. So that, as far as I'm concerned, that's unavoidable. You just have to try to be a custodian of the underlying protocol, which creates a fair playing ground for all the natural stuff that you can't control to come into the system as well.
Azif, do you maybe want to add anything to the conversation before we close up?
Yeah, on this point, I would definitely agree with Lee here, because we also feel that the transaction settlement layer would be really decentralized, and just feel that on the consumer application side, we'll probably see some fragmentation there, as if you people might have seen the Uniswap presentation at HCC. They talked about that they'll be getting sort of these KYC sort of front ends for different types of users who may be comfortable with that approach. So and I guess for the degens and the apes, games will carry on. So yeah, that is probably something that will be the status quo for 2-3 years, and maybe later things may change.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so anyway, let's see what's happened, but as long as we keep striving for innovation, I think we are going to be on the right way. Okay, thank you so much for joining. And yes, it was great to chat with you all.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.